In ancient times, there was a tragic event when young women who were considered witches were captured and brought to be executed in front of everyone. All these punishments were handed down based on a book called the Book of Solomon, which was used as a written source of knowledge to determine whether someone was guilty or not. Some of those who were captured said that they were only practicing simple magic and admitted their mistakes. However, one of the accused elderly old women instead spoke out, defiantly telling a priest that he would surely burn in the eternal fires of hell.
You're gonna burn in hell.
So, after making sure that the 3 women were dead, the priest asked the soldiers to pull them back to make sure that the witches wouldn't rise again. But unfortunately, the soldiers refused, saying that the 3 people were definitely dead and would not come back to life. That night, out of concern, the priest then pulled the 3 women one by one and recited verses from the Book of Solomon over them. He managed to pray over 2 of the women, including the old lady, but when he pulled the last woman, he suddenly felt a pain in his stomach. Years later, during the era of the Crusades, in the Gulf of Adramite, thousands of soldiers could be seen preparing for battle. Among them were 2 knights named Behmen and his companion Felson, who were betting on which of them could kill more enemies. Since then, the 2 of them were almost always able to win every battle they faced. However, in one of the battles when Behmen and Felson, along with their troops, were attacking the city of Smyrna, they ended up killing innocent civilians who were hiding inside the castle walls. Realizing that he had made a mistake, Behmen then tried to question the attack to a religious leader as the person in charge. But since Behmen and Felson only received the answer that all of this was done by God's command, Behmen decided from then on to leave the military.
Let's get the hell out of here.
A month later, after officially becoming local residents, Behmen and Felson began their adventure. While they were walking through the region of Styria, they came across a house whose owner had died, with the body showing signs of blistering. Not wanting to take any risks, the 2 of them decided to leave and burn the house down.
Deserved some not.
From there, the 2 of them continued their journey to a city filled with residents who appeared to be suffering greatly. A soldier named John said that this suffering was caused by the Black Plague, which had spread and killed many people. After chatting, the situation became tense when Behmen, who was selling some of his belongings, accidentally dropped his sword because of a boy's mischief. Several soldiers then appeared after someone reported suspicious behavior from Behmen and Felson. However, even though the 2 managed to defeat the soldiers, Behmen and Felson had to surrender after they were surrounded by a group of archers. Fortunately, there was a church priest named de Belzac who recognized that the sword Behmen was carrying belonged to a knight. From there, de Belzac then took the 2 of them to meet the leader of the region, a cardinal named Ambroise. Inside the room, John, whom they had met earlier, was already present. When they met and the cardinal asked the knight's name, it turned out that he already knew about Behmen and Felson, who had become very famous and highly respected knights. The king then explained that he had been struck by the Black Plague as a result of a curse sent from hell by a witch. This plague can only be stopped by bringing the captured witch to a monastery where the monks are said to possess the last remaining copy of the Book of Solomon. That remaining copy contains words or holy verses that can destroy all existing curses. Unfortunately, because Behmen had promised that he would not obey any orders from the kingdom, in the end Behmen and Felson were thrown into prison. While in prison, Behmen took the opportunity to apologize to Felson for his decision, which ultimately led them to end up like this. While chatting, the 2 of them then noticed a woman named Anna, who was also in the prison and was accused of being a witch. At night, while in prison, Behmen's attitude finally changed after he witnessed how Anna's body seemed to have undergone extraordinary torture. Because of that, in the morning Behmen and Felson met with de Bel to state that they were willing to take the woman to the monastery. but not to help eradicate the plague, rather to prove whether the woman was truly a witch or if she was just being made a scapegoat. Long story short, after making all the arrangements, they then recruited a prisoner named Hagamar who knew both the location and the route to the monastery. Besides Hagamar, John and Debel would also join the mission this time, as well as, of course, the alleged witch.
Who's that?
The witch?
Witch?
During the journey to the monastery, John took the opportunity to ask Father Debel how he managed to capture Anna. Debel explained that he found her wandering alone while muttering strange words, which led him to conclude that the woman was likely a witch. Even after 15 days since her arrival, the terrible plague continued to spread through every town she passed. Next, during the journey, Felson informed Behmen that it seemed like they were being followed by someone. Because of that, they set up an ambush to find out who was following them. It turned out to be a young man named Kay, the son of an honorable knight who lived in a church. Kay had deliberately followed Behmen to offer his help. And if Behmen and Felson were not convinced of his abilities, they were allowed to test him in a fight.
Enough!
Yes, since Kay is still an amateur, he just ends up being the butt of Felson's jokes. But even so, Behmen apparently allows Kay to continue traveling with them. That night, Behmen and the group rest in a forest. While they are relaxing, Behmen brings food and a blanket to Anna. At the same time, he asks her if it was Father Debel who hurt her. Hearing that question, Anna then answers, yes, Father Debel did hurt her, and it's not uncommon for girls like her to always be accused of being witches and thrown into the river to prove whether or not they are witches. After talking to the woman and returning, Debel then tries to warn Behmen that witches have the ability to deceive their victims, making the witch appear as if she is the one who has been hurt. Next, in the middle of the night, while John is on watch, he is suddenly approached by Father Debel, who intends to take his place. But just as John is about to leave, the woman suddenly cries and begs John not to leave her alone with the priest. Curious, John intends to ask her why, but as he approaches her,
I'm not letting it.
Realizing that Anna had escaped, they then began searching and arrived at a village. When they arrived, they had trouble finding Anna's whereabouts, especially since they mistakenly apprehended a woman who suddenly ran away. From there, they continued searching separately. John and Key found a mass grave, while Behmen and the others were in a place that resembled a small labyrinth. At this moment, John, who was with Key, suddenly started hallucinating after he heard the voice of his deceased daughter. As a result of his hallucination, John ended up losing consciousness, running toward Key as if he were chasing after his daughter.
Mila!
When the others arrived, Kay explained that she hadn't meant to do it to John. Kay said that John seemed to be looking at someone else while calling out Mila, which is the name of his daughter. Not long after, they managed to find Anna. Although she resisted and begged not to be taken to the convent, in the end Anna was captured. The next morning, Behmen and the others buried John's body, who had fallen during this journey. Afterwards, Debel tried to tell Behmen that John's death was the work of the witch who had made him hallucinate. Debel was convinced that the witch would use each of their weaknesses to bring them down. On their next journey, they arrived at a crossing bridge that looked very untrustworthy, but since it was the only way, Behmen reluctantly crossed first to make sure it was safe. After making it across, Behmen then told the others to cross immediately. But as they were doing so, the carriage used to imprison Anna suddenly slipped and almost fell. In this situation, Kay, who was hanging on, was unexpectedly saved by Anna, who used a strength that was unusual for a young woman. Fortunately, after using all their strength, they finally managed to bring the carriage across safely before the bridge completely collapsed. Then, once they were on the other side, they continued their journey into a forest shrouded in mist. But since they couldn't possibly move forward without being able to see the path ahead, Behmen finally decided to rest until the fog completely cleared. Long story short, that night, while everyone was asleep, Behmen and Felson caught Hagamar, who was secretly planning to kill Anna because he believed she would bring disaster to their journey. But just as the tension peaked, a loud howl suddenly rang out, followed by the appearance of dozens of wolves that came and attacked them. In that incident, Hagamar became the victim, while the others managed to escape. The next morning, Behmen, frustrated by the various events he had experienced during the journey, suddenly decided to stop unexpectedly, apparently intending to kill Anna. Debel was the first to try and convince Behmen not to do it because if it happened, the fate of tens of thousands of people affected by the Black Plague would end tragically. Fortunately, Felson managed to persuade Behmen by saying that their destination was already in sight.
The end is in sight.
Sometime later, Behmen and the others finally arrived at the entrance of the monastery. But strangely, once they were inside, not a single person came to greet them. At first they thought maybe the monks and priests here were all gathered in the hall. But in reality, all the monks had died from the Black Plague. In the midst of despair, Debel accidentally heard the voice of a monk who was still alive. As he approached, the monk pointed to a book. From there, Debel examined the book and discovered that it was a remnant of the Book of Solomon, containing copies of all the prayer rituals and spells that had been used for centuries to fight against evil forces. Armed with that book, Debel then began the cleansing ritual on the child. But during the process, it turned out that Anna had already started to hurt Debel as he was reciting verses from the Book of Solomon. Behmen, who realized what was happening, then tried to stop her. But before he could get close, Anna suddenly spoke about Begmen's dark side during the war. Behmen had caused the deaths of many innocent people. Hearing Anna's words, everyone was instantly shocked, because it should be impossible for a witch to know about someone's bitter experiences. Debel, who just realized that the entity trapped inside was a demon, then changed his prayer and began the exorcism ritual, which in fact made the situation even more dangerous. So, after making sure that the demon was still in this place, they then tried to regroup and come up with a plan. At this moment, Behmen asked Kai not to join them because it was too dangerous for someone as young as Kay. However, even though he knew this task wouldn't be easy, Kay still chose to help Behmen defeat the demon. Then, after everything was ready, the four of them began their search. On their way to the upper part of the building, Behmen became suspicious about why the demon didn't just run away, but instead chose to stay here. Behmen suspected that from the very beginning, Anna actually intended to come here, though for reasons they still didn't know. So, when they reached the upper part of the building, they found many copies of the Book of Solomon, which the monks had tried to reproduce with the intention of distributing them throughout the world to fight the demon. So it turns out that Anna deliberately made herself appear to be a witch, which would automatically lead to her being brought to this monastery. Even though inside her, there was a demon that wanted to destroy the last remaining copy of the Book of Solomon in this place in order to keep the whole world shrouded in darkness. In the midst of this situation, the demon then appeared, expressing gratitude to Behmen and the others for bringing it to the monastery. Debel, who realized this, immediately recited a verse that instantly provoked the demon to respond by launching an attack, including possessing the bodies of the monks who had died. In that battle, Behmen and his companions managed to defeat the zombies by decapitating them. Unfortunately, Felson fell in the fight, while Debel, who was reciting verses, was also killed after being twisted by the devil. When he saw the creature about to take the fallen Book of Solomon, Behmen quickly burned it with holy water, which enraged the devil and made him immediately grab Behmen by the neck. Feeling he had the upper hand, the devil declared that he would destroy every remaining Book of Solomon in the world. But not long after, Felson, who was still alive, tried to save Behmen by grabbing the creature from behind. Kay then took advantage of this opportunity by continuing to read verses from the Book of Solomon. Behmen, realizing what was happening, tried to protect Kay from the demon's attack. He quickly pushed the creature away and stabbed it in several parts of its body with a knife.
non potere sedurre se giudicare.
So, after the devil was finally defeated, at that very moment my body was freed from the shackles of darkness. However, that was not the case for Behmen, who turned out to have suffered quite severe injuries. In his final moments, Behmen asked Kay to take care of the woman. And finally, Behmen drew his last breath in front of me, who had just regained consciousness in utter confusion. The next morning, the two of them buried the knights and the priest of the order. In this moment, I didn't forget to express my gratitude for all the sacrifices made to save me. That was the summary of the film Season of the Witch, which was released in 2011. I hope you all enjoyed it. Well then, that's all for our story today. And see you again next time. You're all awesome. Bye.